Welcome to the Contrarian Capitalist podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today by John Forrest Little, publisher of the Silver Academy on Substack. John, it's great to finally be able to speak to you. How are you doing?
Well, I mean, if I answered that question correctly, I know we talk to the butcher, baker, and candlestick maker all around the world and say, "How are things going?" And everybody says that they're doing well. But honestly, these we're living, as that fortune cookie says, we're living in interesting times, which is really another way of saying pretty damn scary times. And gold and silver sniff out like a canary in the coal mine. Yeah, today there's a slam going on, but gold is still up 15% just this month and always brings her little sister along. But yes, as far as pleasantries go, I am doing fine. Let's get this show going with some high energy commentary, try to rally some people into investing in silver and gold.
No, absolutely, John. And I should say we are recording this Tuesday, 21st of October. So apologies if there's any big swings in prices between this recording and when this goes out later on this week. John, I want to start on key news out of India, if you don't mind. Obviously, the Diwali festival going on, coming to its end, I think. But its largest refinery has run out of silver for the first time in world history. You wrote about this recently. What's going on over there?
Well, this has been years in the making. We have to remember it all started, well, it's been going on since the Coinage Act of 1792, but let's just say in the recent decade when the Biden regime walked, well, let's say when Russia walked into Ukraine, the response from the US was to seize their assets, or $300 billion. And at that point, then the Russian economist Sergei Glasiev devised a gram of gold per barrel of oil, sort of in and around the dollar. So since then, we've seen massive efforts, and I applaud those efforts to trade outside the US dollar, which was weaponized, sort of a self-inflicted shot in the foot by US monetary and foreign policy people. So India, of all the nations, I'd say India and China, both are the two largest countries in the world, around 1.3 to 1.4 billion people on any given year. They understand the power of silver as a monetary metal as well as an industrial metal. I wrote a story a year ago that Indian women hold more gold than all the central banks combined. And this is decades of using festivals such as the one you just spoke of and weddings. And the reason they do that is to give their children real wealth. Um, Here in the United States, they throw big parties and the weddings cost $40,000. And then after the hangover, the kids wake up and they don't even have a down payment on a home. In India, for example, where they're a little more frugal because they are a little bit more poverty stricken, being a former colony of the British Crown. And anyone in the Southern Hemisphere is mostly a colony of the Northern Hemisphere. But back to this refinery. India also, meanwhile, uses these jewelry companies such as Rajesh Exports, and they fire up on the side a side gig called making silver batteries for the military, which they export to NATO. In the United States, we have Eagle Pitcher is a manufacturer of silver zinc batteries. In Europe, there's SAFT, SAFT, and these batteries are massive. Most of the bigger ones have 11,000 ounces of silver. The batteries are the size of a water heater that you would see power a school, an industrial commercial grade water heater. And if you do a cross section, it's all silver. And the reason they use silver is because of the density, the physical properties of silver. If you're submerging a battery in the ocean, you can't use lithium ion. Anyone's seen videos of Teslas exploding during a hurricane is because moisture and lithium ion technology, they don't work together. So where do you send a battery if you're in the military? It's through the most extreme conditions, such as outer space. You're soaring near the sun, right? Or extreme cold, and only silver has the physical properties. So India has been devouring silver quietly, coding it as jewelry, which fooled the Silver Institute for years, but it was really used militarily and in aerospace. Um, so it would, we all, I think I wrote an article in 2023. It was picked up by SilverSeek saying silver is on the brink of extinction. And I think I had this year or the next as being the year we would start seeing these are new demands for silver. Solar is relatively new. The Samsung Silver State battery, which promises double the range. Instead of 350 miles, you're getting 700, half the charging time. Instead of 25 minutes, half of that. And then imagine the life cycle duration. Instead of being an 8 to 10 year, we now have a 20 year. So who's not going to adopt that? It's a better mousetrap. This it will make solar energy demand look like peanuts. And once again, I think we're the only ones talking about it. But now we also see what really happens when silver gets adopted as a monetary use. We recently saw Saudi Arabia pick up 93,000 shares of SLV. And though I would recommend there's better ways to buy, silver, such as Russia adding silver now to their central bank,
Mm.
and India just for your household wealth and lack of trust in any monetary policy, and to have some bargaining power with all their other cooperating countries in BRICS. They're all stacking fiercely. And just recently, yesterday, I wrote a story that, China, and we've been talking about their yuan is toppling the US dollar and it's gold backed. It's 40% gold backed, but what is it backed in the US? 0%. So I think that just shows the distrust nations have towards one another, and they don't want to be next in that. I alluded to the aforementioned 2022 year where sanctions were levied on Russia. So no one wants to be next. We do it all the time. We did it to Iran. We did it to Venezuela. We just did it to Russia. And here's the karma. So this is just years and years of demand that's pent up, and now we're seeing the cracks. It's not just the India refinery. It's lines around the block in Sydney, Australia, Vietnam, Hong Kong. Here in the States, I've been talking to people like at Sprott Money. They're reporting that for the first time in since they've been watching the Canadian Mint, and they're from Canada, so they would know. 10-ounce silver bars are unavailable, as are 100-ounce. Again, the first time we've ever seen that. So you can pick up some 1-ounce rounds of kangaroos here and there, or go to your local coin store. But on the industrial level, silver is very, very hard to source. The Oriental Ghost on Twitter, we all know him, right? He's reporting at JD.com, which is their largest e-commerce platform next to maybe their Alibaba. Uh, Industrial silver or raw silver is going for anywhere from 68 to $125 dollars per ounce. And I would argue with anyone that that is now the spot price of silver, because silver's going to go, or money's going to flow where it's treated best. And no one takes the COMEX seriously anymore, especially after the nickel disaster and joke of the year, which happened 2 or 3 years ago, where basically they just let the shorts escape. We'll see the same thing with silver. There will be a day where one is supposed to stand for delivery or roll it over at a higher price, and they won't be able to. And that bank or those six banks will just be bailed out by the public. So it's a great gig for them to be in, where all of their wins are privatized and their losses are socialized. It's a crime of the century. But yeah, we can just keep bouncing around the globe. I can tell you what I'm seeing for future, but as far as price action, there's a gentleman, I forgot his name, but he's always says it's important to look at silver priced in relative M2 money supply. And I think he has that number at $650 per ounce, which is magically the same as if you were to honor this 7-to-1 mining ratio of gold to silver. That would put silver at around 650. So just depends what lens. What else you got today, Robert?
No, let's go with that, John, because you've just answered my question about again a recent article about China and $125 silver on the website. I'll link to that article so people can read that. But yeah, let's look at M2 money supply because I know that when people look at it, people will look at the M2 money supply, they'll look at what it looks like in 2030, and then magically you've got, $900,000 Bitcoin and gold's at this price, etc. But that chart you've referenced, I actually saw that yesterday with regards to silver, and yes, it was about 650. So let's talk about that. Where, with everything that's going on, and go into as much detail as you want, where could silver actually end up in terms of price? What are you looking at the moment, and what are your thoughts?
Oh, there's so many scenarios. That's certainly a legitimate one. How we pull it out of the earth. Again, for every 1 ounce of gold that we mine, it's 7 to 8. That's obviously just speaks to the fact that it's extremely precious or scarce. Then another good way to look at it is the Dow to gold ratio, and we see that that's now approaching to where you'll probably be able to buy the Dow with 1 ounce of gold. And then just from there, come up with a gold value of around $15,000 an ounce, and then come up with maybe a compromise between this aggressive 7-to-1, which is not aggressive, it's just based on the fact, the
Hmm.
geological fact of productivity from a mining output standpoint. And then I would start with just your target gold price and then use any metric you like. Even in modern day, let's just say the last 50 years, the gold to silver ratio is still at around 45-to-1. And the reason I like $15,000 gold is because with US $37 trillion debt and rising and servicing that debt at the Fed fund rate of around 4.5%, what does that do to just the daily rate of servicing that debt? I believe it's $4 billion a day. Um, and with a guy like Scott Bessent, the US Treasurer, saying we have to monetize the asset side of the balance sheet. Well, there's nothing else left to monetize. Everything else is financialized and leveraged. And gold is just sitting there on the balance sheet at $42 an ounce. So really, it wouldn't take a genius to say, let's come up with a really, if you go with today's spot price of 4,300 or whatever, at times whatever we say we have at Fort Knox and at Denver Mint and West Point, um, that only gets you to about $1 trillion. That does nothing to the $37 trillion debt. You have to, if you're going to do the reset or the revaluation, you have to make it significant. And Judy Shelton was just on a podcast maybe a day or two ago, and they are moving forward with a gold-backed U.S. Treasury on July 4th, 2026. That's just a fact. Okay, so it makes sense. No one's buying a U.S. Treasury right now when it's tethered to the toxic orbit of $37 trillion debt and a nation that will sanction any other country on a whim. So it's a pretty good idea to, if you're getting your ass kicked by BRICS, what is their playbook? To do the same thing with the panda bonds that are gold backed. So you just want to, if you can't beat them, join them. You have to have another product that rivals theirs, just like Huawei has a product that rivals the iPhone, right? The BYD Chinese auto has a product that rivals US Tesla or whatever our EVs are. So that's just the marketplace. So what will they weight it at? Then you listen to smart people smarter than me, like Luke Groman, who he's talks about just doing the math. I think they have the number at $15,000 an ounce gold, and then you just have to pick your favorite gold to silver ratio. So if you want to catastrophize, go with 50-to-1, and you're still at $300 ounce silver, a far cry from today's. There's a war going on right now with the bankers have to get out of their short positions, so they're trying to slam it down, in the high 40s. So we'll see this dance around 50 for quite some time. Not, I mean, not as long as it took for it to get from 30 to 40, and then half that time from 40 to 50, and then it may be another half that time just to go from 50 to 60. But even at 60, that's still a huge gap between that and probably what I'm seeing is $300 silver by the end of 2026. So that's quite, and that's not that big of a move though. 50, it's a 6x. We see that all the time with these overvalued tech companies. Anywhere from Netflix to PayPal to Amazon to Tesla. They've had moves that are just ridiculous, which points out how just, I don't like to say the word for development delayed. It's like retarded or something like that. But it's really retarded to think that these tech companies that really don't make anything um, have these sorts of silly valuations. And then if you take the basket of the Magnificent Seven, that would be pretty much the breadth of our of the stock market. It's very scary. There used to be a time when I was younger, you would actually ask your dad, like, well, what stocks are you buying? And they would say U.S. Steel or an energy company like Exxon or Chevron, or even something that makes something like a John Deere or Procter and Gamble that made toothpaste and household products. And now you don't see any of those things in the Magnificent Seven, not one. It's all tech, which yesterday was shut down for half the day. There was no internet, right? I mean, I don't know if that happened to you there, but we just can't and talk about the crypto people that like to troll me and make fun of me. It's because I'm a boomer that believes in these shiny rocks, whatever. I guess I could be mean and fire back like, "Where's your money today with no internet?" And gold and silver still shine in the candlelight, but with crypto, you have nothing. That's talk about counterparty risk. Your money's stored on a ledger on the internet that was shut down, and you will see more shutdowns in your future, especially as the villagers start organizing on TikTok or Twitter to fight the political class. Get ready for more shutdowns.
100%. I think that there's a lot going on around the world at the moment. John, just on the physical silver deficit, and I know the Silver Institute says that it's about 117 million ounces for 2025, fifth year of deficit, etc. I know that you do a lot of traveling around the world and you write a lot about the physical mines itself. I'm sure most people know that about 70% of silver is a byproduct, but in
Mhm.
terms of that deficit improving, i.e., will it ever become a surplus? Again, from your experiences and from who you're talking to at the moment, what's going on in the physical mining space with regards to silver?
Wow, yeah. So let's say that if we take, I like the Silver Institute's number on that, about 830 million. That was in a good year in the last six, so probably down about 810 next year with Mexico under stress. So let's say 810 million, and then there's demand at 1.4. So there's your deficit, 1.4 billion, and rising because of solar energy and the Samsung's silver solid state and all the other electronics and then the monetary side. So then we're looking at there's been very, very, very few new discoveries of silver. There are some that some junior miners are advancing, but they're nowhere near being a full-blown production. Okay, so now you have to look at why do you think, coincidentally, U.S. finally added silver as a critical mineral, right? Because of this sort of deficit. But it gets worse because the ore grades aren't where they used to be. Robert, if you and I fired up a mining company and it was not that long ago, let's say in the 1940s, and you and I had wheelbarrows and a pickaxe, we could get per 1 ton of earth that we moved out up to 40 ounces of silver. Now, with that same effort, you're looking at maybe a half ounce of silver. That's just what happens when it's sort of like the good fruit is easy to just find off the tree, right?
Mm.
Now we're looking at strip mining versus just traditional ways of mining. So if you don't add any new silver discoveries, now you're faced with just, and a lot of them are behind the quote, BRICS curtain. China's not going to export any silver to you, Mr. Western investor. Um, so we have to look at Mexico typically being the number one producing silver producer in the world, and their new president saying no new mining, no new mining concessions. It scared some silver mining executives like Endeavor, who had always developed resources in Mexico when they went running to Peru. Um, that was just in the last 6 months. So let's talk about silver producing nations. You can use the camp: Chile, Argentina, Mexico, Peru. And I always add a second C there for Canada. And then I add a second M for Morocco. So it's kind of like amp, you have to say it twice. But so you got Canada, and then you've got, Argentina, Mexico, Peru, and then USA with wonderful deposits in New Mexico, Idaho, Colorado, Nevada, the Tonopah region, and Alaska. So again, but those US assets and those Canadian assets, when you think of US assets, you're thinking of what was Suma Silver, now Silver 47, or BlackRock Silver. Again, none of these companies give me money. BlackRock with Mr. Pollard, he's developing deposits in Nevada. Galen McNamara is developing them in New Mexico and also in Tonopah. And then we have Dolly Varden, our friends, Sean Kunkun of Dolly Varden's. That's a wonderful, I think there's well over 100 million ounces there in the Golden Triangle region of Vancouver. And same with Suma Silver's their merger with Silver 47. They have over 239 million ounces. But again, we're talking 9 years away.
Mhm.
Uh, so I think there is a gentleman from Europe named Simon Michel who says for every 2,000 deposits, maybe one will turn into an operating mine. And then if you take 10 of those, two or three will go bankrupt. And that's what you brought up, Robert, is that risk if you're tied to silver as a byproduct metal. You don't want that. You want a pure silver play like Aya Silver in Morocco, or Bolivia's Andean precious metals, or Cuyas in Peru. Those are pure silver mining plays. They're not subject to the counterparty risk of what happens if tin goes down, or what happens if lead goes down, or exposure to copper. I mean, copper is a great play right now, but look at the mines that have been shut down in copper recently. Most recently, Indonesia with that earthquake, and they shut down some in Mexico, as well as a big producing mine in Panama recently. Um, anyway, so we're seeing that silver is pretty much, as the slogan goes online, unobtanium.
Mhm.
We'll see wild volatility. We'll just wild. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see, smash of 6% and a rise. It usually gets walked up 3%, 3%, 3%, smash, 3%, 3%, 3%, smash, three. I could do a dance to it. Da 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 da. And the idea is like if you're on the back of a bucking bronco, the average person doesn't have the appetite for that sort of volatility. I mean, I'm going to have to go and get my heart checked. I'm 60, I'm getting old. I'm overweight. It's like this volatility. And now you discover, I think it was Craig Himke or James, sorry, there was a gnat in front of me. It was actually James of ST Bullion who found this WikiLeaks cable, that basically that the futures market was engineered by the bankers to introduce volatility to scare off or to demoralize people from holding gold and silver. Because once everybody gets the inside information that you should have gold and silver, there'd be no use for the US dollar. I mean, this is an old playbook. Mayor Rothschild first said, I could care not who sits on the crown, the puppet who sits on the crown, give me control of the currency. But at the same time, the trick is also like, hey, turn in your gold and silver. We're going to vault that and we're going to issue paper substitutes of gold and silver. Then there's the rug pull, like Nixon saying, well, there's no longer convertibility. So now you just have IOUs, and then the people are fighting back. But we're very few still. We're only a half of 1% believe that gold and silver are even money. Hey, Robert, have you ever seen that guy on YouTube who offers people like an ounce of gold or a piece of chocolate and they take the chocolate
Hmm.
instead?
Yeah, I've
He's
seen that
chasing
guy.
them around. Most of the people are under 60 years old and they don't want to even look at the gold or the silver. So it's incredibly how much gaslighting it takes. You got to remember who controls the media. Right? There's only four or five
Mm.
companies in the United States that control all the newspapers, and whether it's Fox on the right or MSNBC on the left, it's basically Viacom, General Electric, Time Warner, maybe Xfinity. And then if you even look deeper, these are the people that contribute to political campaigns. And if you look deeper, they also make weapons. Um, it's just like Septimus said on his deathbed. Severus Septimus was a late stage Roman Empire. He said, he's whispering to his kids, take care of the soldiers first and scorn all others. He says scorn. He doesn't say ignore all others. Scorn is basically treat them like shit. And what we had a government shutdown recently, and it's just like, fire everyone. But except the soldiers. That hasn't changed. So really, this is just an old playbook, vault the silver and gold, issue paper notes instead, and then just keep printing and printing and printing, printing and printing and printing. Pretty soon, the villagers are ravaged with inflation. So that's all we're seeing is this massive, go to the grocery store. I don't know what it's like in Mexico City, but I go here in Pittsburgh, and you're looking at maybe five items costing $40. I mean, come on. So right now, what we're seeing is a debasement trade. We can talk about the deficits in silver. We can talk about central banks buying gold, but it's no matter of wonderment why Morgan Stanley's coming up with a recommendation of 20% gold allocation,
Mm.
which was 40%. It was 60 equities, 40 bonds. So now they're saying sell half of your bonds and buy gold. At the same time, that Ray Dalio is repeatedly repeating that warning. At the same time as Griffin of Citadel is repeating that warning. Um, I think that's a bigger amount of money that will rotate into gold than central bank buying because the bond market's about 59 trillion. So year after year or month after month, you're going to see people ravaged by inflation. And that's why we're seeing lines around the block. But really, it comes down to a headline I wrote is like 2 years ago that gold drops like a rock when people trust the system, but it soars to the moon when they don't. So who trusts the system and what is the system? Is it our monetary policy? Is it fractional reserve banking? Is it is it the stock market? Is it massive layoffs? I don't know what it is like in Mexico right now or for you when you were in England, but the US is hit with these layoffs like I've never seen before in the tech sector. And I guess we can blame AI, but we also enjoy AI. There's a time where the Luddites were fearful of a machine that automatically wove uh, textiles. So they thought that this thing was the devil, just like because it took jobs. There
Mhm.
was a time when there was a horse that used to, transport goods, and then the iron horse shows up, or Ford has the Model T, and they were so connected, the people that made the trailers for horses, that they lobbied for a law called the yellow flag law, where if you had a car you had to employ people to follow your car and precede your car with a yellow flag to let the pedestrians know that this dangerous hunk of metal is coming your way. And that's where we get the saying that that's a yellow flag, meaning that it could be approaching death. It's a warning. But yeah, may you live in interesting times. What else is going on? The U.S. has 850 military bases around the world, and just take the case study of Afghanistan. We were there for 20 years at 2.5 trillion. That's 5 times the price of Vietnam. And we replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. It's like, that's so good. And left, I think, 40,000 Humvees and 700 Black Hawk helicopters and thousands of tanks and night vision goggles and hundreds of thousands of machine guns, and everything we do is, as Einstein said, we need to fear the rise of the military industrial complex. Yet the Trump regime says, oh, during this shutdown of now it's close to 1 million workers, federal workers, make sure you pay the soldiers. But Trump is kind of a pussy. If I were a pussy, I would just want to have a bunch of bodyguards too. It's always been the playbook of the king to hide behind the castle wall, and the ruling elite know that their turn is up soon. And so the way we fight back as let's just say as revolutionaries is we don't fight with our guns because we're outgunned, but we can fight with silver. So it's sort of a vote in no confidence, a no trust vote. And we have a lot to distrust. I mean, here in the US, we have both sides of the aisle stealing money. It used to be a democracy. Then that was replaced by a plutocracy, governed by a few, which is then replaced by aristocracy, governed by the elite. And now it's kleptocracy where they're just stealing the money. Um, Schumer's been in Congress, a Democrat, for over 40 years. Pelosi of 38 years. King Bernie Sanders over 40 years. They're stealing money through these wars, unending wars, funding both sides, propping up Lockheed Martin. Israel's now occupied the United States because we don't want to release and 210 Republicans block the release of the Epstein files. Well, maybe it's because there's some big names in the Epstein files. I think it was the prince in England. What's his name? Charles, or I can't, Andrew, maybe.
Andrew, yeah.
And he was stripped of his title because
Mhm.
he's having sex with children. So what we'll find out of, Supreme Court justices, billionaires, Trump himself, when, has been photographed with Epstein more than any other person, raping children. I mean, this is kind of harkens back to Rome and their orgies, while the villagers are paying $50 for 5 items in their grocery basket. But the CPI says, oh no, it's 2%. It's 2% inflation. It's like, well, why did ground beef go from 3.50 to $10? I mean, 2%. Electricity's doubled in the last year here in Pittsburgh. Um, and who's devouring all the electricity? It'll be AI. I
Mhm.
believe an AI query, it uses 80 times more energy than a typical Google search, and here I am just
Wow.
making silly memes using AI to make a good looking illustration. AI, a big user of silver, right? Every time. Why? Because of its conductivity.
Mhm.
Silver next to gold has the highest, let's just say they're equal. They are. Gold is a noble metal, meaning it does the best in that when it's mixed with gases or oxygen, it's not impacted. In fact, it's the only metal that gets stronger under laser attack. That sounds like a science fiction plot, but it does. Um, and now they're coating satellites and Earth stations with gold, which if you take an ounce of gold and pound it on a table, you can get 300 square feet of gold foil. That's malleable. Same with silver, it's pretty ductile. It's also that's that energy density that will make it irreplaceable or you can't substitute for it in these industrial applications. So silver's gone. except for what you can buy. Um, and when I say gone, I'm saying that sarcastically. I'm just saying at the rate that we're living in terms of wanting our mobile phones, wanting our electric cars, um, and all those other things, it is pretty much unobtainium. And ore grades are declining. Mexico's shut down. I mean, according to these aren't my words. These come right from the top of the Morena party. No new mining
Mhm.
concessions. Well, if you can't go to, there's only so much juice to squeeze off an orange. And when it's gone, it's gone. You can't just keep picking up that same orange, right? You need to find other oranges. What else do we got? How are we doing on time? Sorry, I'm on these long soliloquies. Try spelling the word soliloquy. It's tough, but there's a lot going on in my head.
No, John, it's part of the joy of doing this is being able to ask questions and just sitting back and listening and learning. I think that to summarize, I think it's a good place to wrap up. So you've gone through a variety of mechanics out there with regards to physical silver, what's going on behind the scenes, lack of trust in the system and so forth. I think people would yell at me if I don't ask you about mining stocks in general. Now, I'm not going to ask you to name mining stocks, etc., etc. But this is going to be out just before Newmont's Q3 earnings. That's going to set the scene for, I think, some wild results, and I'm sure most people would agree. In terms of mining stocks, if you want to name them, is there anything in particular that you're looking out for, or is it just a case of this is now just part of the trend and it's good times if you're in the mining stocks? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is mining stocks have gotten zero love, let's just say 30 years. Okay. So they are so undervalued. It's as if gold were still 1,500 an ounce or maybe 2,000 an ounce. You got to remember their costs are going to go down because oil's going to get slammed because of the US government still hasn't admitted we're in a recession, right? As defined as two consecutive quarters of negative GDP
Mm,
uh, reports, which happened under the Biden administration about 2 years ago. So let's say I think the best guy to listen to on this subject, he's fantastic, is Peter Schiff. Every Friday he has a market wrap and he's trying to explain to people what's going to happen with these mining stocks. So let's just take the gold mining stocks first. If they're pulling gold out of the ground at around 12 to $1,500 an ounce and it's trading for $4,000 an ounce, that's massive profit. I mean, there's not a business model out there from Netflix to Tesla to Amazon that has that kind of scale. So they're evaluating now. Wall Street analysts haven't priced any of that. What we call profit and earnings against, what that's just massive profit and earnings there. So and the reason Wall Street won't price that in is because they always act like gold is going down.
mhm,
So once there's that reckoning, and people figure out that these other items that we talked about earlier that are all tech are so overvalued, that's when we get into what we call the rush into tangibles. Or if you follow Tavi Costa on Twitter, he's always drawing lines showing what the S&P to commodities or the US dollar to commodities, or that's what you want to look at. So silver always follows her big sister. Once again, they were profitable when silver was at 28, 29. I mean, I've only been doing this for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and we all bought silver at around $25 an ounce, and it took forever to break 30. But the miners they were unloved, but they were still profitable.
mhm,
Now just think how much more they are at 50. That's a huge leap. And remember, gold is sort of the leverage play on the US dollar. Silver's the leverage play on gold. And miners are the leverage play on the physical. So that's why today, if you see a smash of 6%, you're going to get scared when you sign into your miner stock and see that the SILJ is down 12%. Again, you have to have a stomach for that kind of volatility. I can't, all I say is don't turn on your computer after you purchase this stuff and let it But GDX, let's look what they are up on the year. Are they doubled? They've doubled. GDXJ, I believe, is 140% on the year. So while physical gold is up maybe 60% on the year, silver is even higher. So it's obviously, are we going to wake up tomorrow and see that the US no longer has $37 trillion debt? Are we going to wake up tomorrow and see that there aren't massive layoffs? Are we going to wake up tomorrow and see that Congress says you can no longer buy and sell stocks after an intelligence briefing? Are we going to wake up tomorrow and see that all of a sudden there's jobs for everyone who wants one? Are we going to wake up tomorrow and see that rents still are not sky high and that the purchasing power of the dollar is miraculously what it once was when Nixon shut the gold convertibility? We're not going to wake up to any of those headlines. We will get distracted by who Taylor Swift is dating and is Britney Spears going to do a tour in Vegas and what's going on with the Chiefs versus who will they play in the playoffs? And listen, I love sports. You know, I used to play NCAA sports back before I turned into an obese worrywart. Um, my point is gold and silver drop like a rock when people trust the system. But guess what? No one trusts anything anymore. No one trusts employment figures. They're always revised. No one trusts the CP lie. No one trusts the tell lie vision. Wars are going to continue being unending. And when they print the fiat to pay for the wars, the villagers are ravaged with inflation. And you cannot print this. This was $10. Those are those 50-cent pieces with Kennedy's face on them. There's 20 of them in there. It was worth $10 in 1964, and it's worth close to 400 today. Hello. Anyway, I'd like
I
to thank you, Robert, for allowing me to pontificate. Normally, I'm pretty subdued today. I was going to try to be fired up like Gerald Celente, but never. But whenever you try to predict what your mood's going to be, it changes. Let's just end with a quote by Voltaire. I
Mhm.
started with a quote by Severus Septimus of take care of the villagers first and scorn all others. But Voltaire said, when life is a shipwreck, sing in the lifeboats. And the lifeboats are gold and silver. And thank you
Uh,
for your time today, Robert.
no, John, an absolute pleasure. I'll link to various posts in the Substack post as well. Of course, people can find your work at the Silver Academy on Substack. Again, I'll link to that. I've learned a lot today, John. Thank you for your time and look forward to catching up next year.
Again, it was my honor. I read your report and we'll be cross-posting. So I like the contrarian capitalists.